The day I found out my sister-in-law had been using my business accounts, I was sitting in a Panera booth with a lukewarm coffee, and my laptop open to what I thought was going to be a routine quarterly check. My husband and I had been married for 4 years. His sister Fiona had been a problem for about 3.5 of them. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. I did not come into this marriage looking for a fight. I came in with a catering business I had built from scratch over 6 years, a client roster of about 40 regular accounts, and the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you've made. I was 28. Fiona was 31. She had the kind of smile that made you feel like you were in on a joke, and it took me longer than I care to admit to figure out that the joke was always about me. The Panera thing matters because of what I saw when I finally opened my business banking portal that Tuesday morning. I had been meaning to do a proper review for weeks. Tax season was approaching, and my accountant, a no-nonsense woman named Vera who had been doing my books since the beginning, had sent me a calendar reminder flagged in red. Quarterly reconciliation, do not skip. I remember thinking I would just do a quick scan before my 11 o'clock client call. What I found instead kept me in that booth for 4 hours. There were 17 wire transfers I did not recognize, spread across 11 weeks. The amounts ranged from $340 to $2,800. The destination account had a name on it I didn't know, but the routing number traced back to a regional bank in the same county where Fiona lived. 17 transfers, 11 weeks. A total of just over $19,000. I sat there and read the numbers 3 times because the first 2 times my brain simply refused to process them as real. I thought about calling my husband right then. I picked up my phone, I put it back down. I needed to understand the full picture before I said a single word to anyone in that family. Here is what you need to understand about how Fiona could have gotten access in the first place. When my husband and I got married, I had made one decision I would spend years regretting. I had added him to my business account as a secondary authorized user, not because I needed to, not because the business required it, but because a financial advisor we saw together had mentioned something vague about household asset consolidation. And I had been young and newly married and stupidly in love, and I had thought we are building something together, why would I keep walls up? My husband never touched that account. In 4 years, I do not think he logged in once. But Fiona had apparently borrowed his login credentials, something she admitted to later, casually, like it was nothing. Like helping yourself to someone else's passwords was a perfectly reasonable thing to do between siblings. She had been watching the account for months. She knew my billing cycles. She knew when large client payments came in. She had timed every single transfer to fall within 3 to 5 days of a deposit, small enough individually to avoid triggering an automatic fraud flag, large enough collectively to drain nearly $20,000 from my operating cash. She had done this with a level of patience and planning that, honestly, still makes my stomach turn, not because it was sophisticated, but because it meant she had looked at me, talked to me at family dinners, hugged me at Christmas, and spent months stealing from me at the same time. That kind of sustained deception takes a specific kind of person. I called Vera before I called anyone else. She pulled up her records, confirmed the anomalies, and said 7 words I will never forget. "Sweetheart, you need to call the police." I did not call the police that day. I made a different call first. I called my bank's fraud department and told them I believed I had an unauthorized user accessing my business account through a secondary credential. They froze the account within 20 minutes, flagged all 17 transactions for review, and opened an internal investigation. The representative I spoke with walked me through every transfer, confirmed the destination routing information, and told me that the pattern was, in their words, consistent with deliberate structured withdrawal to avoid detection thresholds. She used the phrase check fraud and electronic funds transfer fraud and asked if I wanted to file a formal report with them and with law enforcement. I said yes to both. I did not tell my husband that night. I know that sounds cold. But I needed 24 hours to think clearly, and I knew that the moment I said Fiona's name out loud in our house, everything would become about managing his feelings and managing his mother's feelings, and I would lose the thread of what actually happened. I have learned over the years that when something goes wrong, my first instinct is to make everyone around me comfortable. I was trying very hard to not do that this time. I filed the police report on a Wednesday morning. The detective who took my statement was a woman about 10 years older than me. She listened without interrupting, looked at the documentation I had brought. Printed bank records, timestamps, the account name on the destination transfers, and said she would need to subpoena the receiving bank's records to confirm the account holder's identity. She told me that what I was describing sounded like it met the threshold for felony theft under state law, given the total amount. She said they would be in touch. I drove home and I finally told my husband. I want to be careful about how I describe what happened next because my husband is not the villain of this story. What he did in that conversation was not evil. But it was something I had seen before in smaller ways, and seeing it happen at this scale, when the stakes were this high, was its own kind of heartbreak. He went quiet for a long time, then he said, "Are you sure it was her?" I showed him the records. I walked him through every transfer. I explained the timing, the amounts, the destination routing information. He sat at our kitchen table and stared at the paper, and then he said, "She might have had a reason. You don't know what she was going through." I remember the specific quality of the silence in the room after he said that. The refrigerator hum, the sound of a neighbor's lawnmower outside, the way the afternoon light was coming through the blinds in long pale strips across the floor. I said, "She took $19,000 from my business account. Over 11 weeks. While sitting at our dinner table and smiling at my face, he said, "I'm just saying, maybe there's a conversation we should have before you involve the police." I told him the police were already involved. He called his mother that night. I know because I heard him in the guest room, speaking quietly with the door almost closed, the way you speak when you're saying things you don't want the other person in the house to hear. His mother called me the next morning. My mother-in-law is a woman who has spent her entire adult life believing that her children's problems are the world's problems and the world's job to fix. She called me at 8 in the morning before I had finished my first cup of coffee, and she said, "I cannot believe you would do this to this family." I said, "Someone stole $19,000 from me," she said. "Fiona is struggling. You know she's been struggling. You have a successful business and she has nothing right now, and instead of being there for her, you're going to strangers drag her name through the mud." I want to pause here and say something directly. I have heard a version of this speech my entire time in this family. The context changes, the dollar amount changes, but the structure is always the same. Fiona is struggling. You have more than she does. Why can't you just help? Why do you always have to make things difficult? What no one in that family ever seemed to notice, or chose not to notice, was that I had helped. I had helped in ways large and small for 4 years. I had hired Fiona for 3 catering events and paid her above market rate. I had lent her money twice, small amounts that were never repaid and never mentioned again. I had let things go I should not have let go, smoothed over moments I should have pushed back on, smiled at things that deserved a direct response. The thing about being patient and accommodating for a long time is that when you finally stop, everyone acts like you were the one who escalated. My mother-in-law told me I was being selfish. She told me I was letting money come between family. She told me Fiona had made a mistake, and that mistakes deserved compassion, not punishment. She cried on the phone. She said she didn't know how she was going to explain this to people. I said, "I'm not asking you to explain anything. I'm telling you what happened and what I've done about it. I filed a report because that's what you do when someone steals from you." She said she hoped I could find it in my heart to be more forgiving. I said, "I hope Fiona can find it in her heart to hire an attorney." I hung up. The next 72 hours were some of the loudest of my marriage. Fiona called. Her husband called. An aunt I had met exactly 4 times called to tell me that this was not how family handled things. My husband moved between being angry at me and being ashamed of his family and being angry at me again. There were conversations that went in circles and ended badly. There were things said that I don't think either of us will fully forget. But through all of it, I kept coming back to one number, $19,000. The amount I had earned by driving to venues at 5 in the morning, by managing staff through events that ran until 2 a.m., by spending nights in my car eating granola bars because there wasn't time to sit down for a real meal. $19,000 that someone had simply decided to take because they thought they could, because they had looked at me and calculated that I was the kind of person who would let it go. I was not going to let it go. The detective called me back 8 days after I filed the report. She confirmed that the subpoenaed records showed the destination account was held in Fiona's name. She told me the case was being forwarded to the district attorney's office and that I would likely be contacted by a prosecutor within a few weeks. She also said that in cases like this, it was not uncommon for the defendant to be offered a chance to make full restitution in exchange for a reduced charge, but that this was ultimately the DA's decision and mine. I called Vera and told her what the detective had said. Vera told me to document everything, every penny, every date, every communication, and to not discuss the case with my in-laws. I was already doing all of those things. Fiona called me the day after I heard from the detective. She did not call to apologize, she called to tell me that she was shocked that I had taken it this far. She said she had always planned to pay it back. She said she had just needed time. She said she couldn't believe I had chosen money over family. I let her finish. Then I said, Fiona, I want to be very clear with you. You accessed my business account without my knowledge or consent over a period of 11 weeks and transferred nearly $20,000 to yourself. There is no version of that which is a favor I extended to you. There is no version of that which is a loan. You stole from me. The police know. The DA's office knows. If you have more to say, please say it to your attorney. She started crying. I waited until she finished, then I said, I hope you understand that I'm not angry with you. I'm just done with you. I hung up. My husband and I had the real conversation, the one underneath all the other conversations, about 10 days later. We sat at the kitchen table again, same table where I had shown him the bank records. He said he had been doing a lot of thinking. He said he understood now why I had done what I did, and that he was sorry he had responded the way he had. He said he was struggling because this was his sister, but that he knew that didn't make what she did okay. I said, I know this is hard for you, but I need you to understand that I am not willing to minimize what happened to keep the peace. Not this time, he said. I know. I said, if we're going to stay in this marriage, I need you to be in it with me, not in the middle. He was quiet for a moment. Then, he said, I'm in it with you. I believed him. I still believe him, though I watch more carefully now. Marriage has a before and after to it that nobody tells you about when you're standing at the altar. The before is the version you imagine. The after is the version you build, sometimes with tools you didn't know you'd need. The DA's office contacted me 6 weeks after I filed the report. Fiona had agreed to a plea arrangement, full restitution of the $19,000 plus interest, a formal felony charge reduced to a misdemeanor upon completion of payment, and 2 years of probation, and mandatory financial counseling. The prosecutor explained that because it was a first offense and because full restitution was on the table, this was a reasonable outcome. I had the right to make a victim impact statement if I chose to. I chose to. I don't know exactly what I expected to feel, standing in that room. I had written the statement carefully. I had revised it 4 times. I had read it out loud to Vera, who had nodded and told me it was exactly right. What I felt, when I actually said the words in front of the judge, was something quieter than I expected. Not triumph, not anger. Something closer to the feeling you get when you finally set down something very heavy that you have been carrying for a long time. I said that what had happened was not just about money. I said that the financial impact had been real. The disruption to my cash flow, the legal fees, the time I had spent managing a crisis instead of running my business. But that the deeper damage had been to something harder to quantify. I said that I had spent years extending good faith to someone who had used that good faith as a tool. I said that filing the report had not been an act of aggression. It had been an act of honesty, an acknowledgement that what happened was wrong and that wrong things have consequences. The judge thanked me for my statement. Fiona did not look at me once during the entire proceeding. I have not spoken to her since. My mother-in-law called me 3 weeks after the hearing. I answered, which surprised me a little. She did not apologize. She said she hoped we could eventually move past this. I told her I was open to a relationship with her, but that I would not be attending any family events where Fiona was present, and that I needed her to understand that my decision to file the report was not something I would discuss or revisit. She said that was very cold. I said that was fine. She calls on holidays now. We talk about surface things. I am polite. I am not warm. There is a difference, and I have decided I'm comfortable with that difference. My business recovered. The restitution payments came in on a court-supervised schedule, 4 installments over 18 months, and Vera verified each one. I removed my husband from the business account. I changed every password associated with my company, audited my vendor access lists, and added two-factor authentication to every financial platform I use. My accountant sends me a monthly statement now instead of quarterly. I look at it every time it arrives. The thing I think about sometimes when I'm driving to an early morning event or sitting at that Panera booth or wherever I happen to be when my brain goes quiet, the thing I think about is the version of me that almost let it go. She was very close. She was right there, in those first hours after I saw the transfers, thinking about how hard this would be for my husband, how it would blow up the holidays, how everyone would be upset, how Fiona would cry, how my mother-in-law would say I had destroyed the family. That version of me almost won. I'm glad she didn't. Because here is what I know now that I didn't let myself know then. The people who benefit from you letting things go will always tell you that letting things go is the kind thing to do. They will dress it up in words like family and forgiveness and perspective. What they mean is, please absorb this damage silently so we don't have to deal with the consequences of what we did. I absorbed a lot of damage silently for a long time. I was good at it. I had practice, but $19,000 has a way of clarifying things. I built this business with my hands and my time and years of early mornings and late nights, and meals I ate standing up at folding tables in event venues. I built it when no one was watching, before anyone in that family had ever asked me how it was going, before I had a client list or a reputation, or any of the things that apparently made me worth stealing from. I filed that report for myself, not for the money though I wanted the money back, not to punish Fiona though I'll be honest. I don't lose sleep over the consequences she faced. I filed it because I had finally gotten clear on something that had taken me too long to understand. My work has value. My time has value. My money has value. And I am not going to apologize for treating those things as if they matter. Nobody gets to take from me and call it love. Nobody gets to steal from me and call me selfish for noticing. The door to that version of my life, the one where I stayed quiet, where I let it go, where I kept the peace at the cost of everything I had built, that door is closed. I am the one who closed it, and I have never once wished I'd left it open.